Hi everybody, welcome and thank you for joining me today. I saw that Charles's speech was indeed short, so I decided to watch it or listen to it. Well, I don't know, maybe it was redacted. I truly don't know and I do not really care. I watched the 2-minute 59-second version and that is about as much as I can take of his voice anyway. Well, at the very least, I was not lied to the day before yesterday, and his speech was exactly, almost word for word, what I told you it would be. So there's nothing more left to say. I had already said it all in yesterday's video. At least it had less I's and me's in it than I expected. Otherwise, well, like I said, he said exactly what I had been told he would say. Anyway, today is Queen Elizabeth's birthday, so our topics will indeed surround her and her life. The three major events or milestones in the Queen's life all happened within more or less 5 years. And when she was indeed similar to or like Diana, relatively young. She was only 21 when she married Philip Mountbatten on November the 20th, 1947. She was 22 years old when she gave birth to her first child, Charles, on November 14th, 1948. And then she was only 25 years old when her father passed away and she became queen on February the 6th, 1952. On February the 6th, 1952, she was also already the mother of 2 toddlers, as Anne was born on August 15th, 1950. Again, my favorite game. Imagine yourself getting married, being pregnant twice, having 2 babies, and then still also becoming queen in 5 years. How would you have coped? We all know they have cooks and nannies and bottle washers, but there's still a burden on the body and the soul. Losing your father, becoming queen, being pregnant twice, etc., etc. It is indeed a lot. No wonder the Queen became a rather tough cookie in later life. For 73 years, the Queen had another type of support, other than that of her courtiers, her advisors, and her government. She indeed had Prince Philip, or did she? Prince Philip, a man whose relationship with his wife was based on his own unstable and rather traumatic childhood, his naval career, and the rigidity and discipline that career brought and instilled in him. When Philip promised the then young Elizabeth, "till death us do part," he actually meant it. And he meant it no matter the circumstances. Philip was indeed fiercely loyal and protective. But of what? From everything I read and was told, Philip was indeed loyal and protective of his queen and his adoptive country, and not always as much of his wife, the woman Elizabeth. In public, Philip had to sacrifice his naval career when his wife became queen. He loved his job, absolutely, fully enjoyed what he was doing. Philip was a man's man. He loved getting his hands into and onto things. He was a success in his chosen career, and he was perfectly adept at being one of the guys and at the same time being the authoritarian. So regardless of the respected sacrifice, there were indeed times when Philip did show a smidge of resentment. It suits family and friends, the media and the public to think that there was never any resentment, but that is not true. Philip did not wallow in it, and it did not really define who he was, but he did let on to his closest friends that he regretted giving up his naval career. He told those closest to him that he felt that he had given up and lost his personal ambition, and even more so, his independence. He once famously stated, "There has never been an if only, except perhaps that I regret not having been able to continue a career in the Navy." An era where the husband was traditionally the head of the household, Philip had to navigate being a subject to his wife. Philip had authority over the private estates, Balmoral and Sandringham, and at home he was indeed the alpha parent. But despite all the respect everyone had for Philip, despite his loyalty and charm, Philip could also be demanding and abrasive, particularly in private. His motto of service over self and just get on with it was indeed well known. But somewhere among being queen, producing heirs, a young Elizabeth also had to deal with a demanding, sometimes abrasive husband. A husband who used manipulation and his so-called sacrifice as negotiating tools to obtain boys' nights and all kinds of solo social outings. There was the Thursday Club with members like David Niven, Peter Ustinov, Lord Mountbatten and Stephen Ward of the Profumo scandal fame. The club was known for its absolute lack of inhibition. There was even rumours that Prince Philip was the man in the mask who served drinks at the sex parties hosted by Stephen Ward. Philip also frequented the Coes Week, a sailing week, or the Guards Polo Club. And back at the palace, Elizabeth did indeed hear all the rumours and gossip. And there are many who say that her isolation and loneliness was sometimes profound. Luckily for Elizabeth, she had her mother and sister to give her advice and keep her company. There is no record of an official split or legal separation between Elizabeth and Philip, but there were two very distinct periods in their marriage when they were effectively living separate lives. One of those times was the 1956 World Tour. In late 1956, Philip embarked on a tour of the Commonwealth aboard the Royal Yacht Britannia. He was away for approximately 4 months, October 1956 to February 1957. During that period, rumours were rife. Rumours of infidelity became so loud that Buckingham Palace issued a very rare formal statement. The statement read, "It is quite untrue that there is any rift between the Queen and the Duke." On his return, the Queen made him a Prince of the realm. Still, even with Philip's return and the Queen's obvious delight in having him back, rumors did not die down. What was mere gossip on the fringes of royal circles had never been debunked, and today, in a way I'm grateful to say, after Her Majesty's death, the gossip has turned into rather serious biographical discussions and research due to the remarks made by the likes of Andrew Lownie. So as you know, I personally do not take to Andrew Lownie too kindly or too favourably, and the reasons are purely professional. As an author, biographer and a publisher, one would expect Lownie to know the rules of publishing. A biography differs from a novel in the sense that a biography is, or is supposed to be, factual. Yes, I indeed agree with Lownie that a certain margin for error should and can be left or calculated in, as this would be a third-party account, which, like I said, does leave room for erroneous interpretation. But that does not mean that you purposefully write a falsehood or egregious thing into your manuscript and just excuse it with a tiny, minute footnote stating that there is no proof of such as what you wrote. Okay? That there's no proof of such as what you wrote. Well, my dears, if there is no proof, then why even put it in your book? My answer would be because it's salacious or because the author himself has an agenda. I also do not particularly like liars. Andrew Lownie has clearly stated in so many words on podcasts with the likes of Dan Whitten, Lady C and others that he is a monarchist. And that is not true at all. Andrew Lownie very, very much aligns himself in private and otherwise with anti-monarchy sentiments and have even published the Leader of Republic's book. And Andrew Lownie is still promoting the book and it is still on his website. I have no issue with someone being an anti-monarchist. A couple of my friends are indeed very, very adamant anti-monarchists. And I mean, you do you. I myself am very conflicted at the moment. But, I mean, be honest about it. Don't lie. Why lie? Well, in Andrew Lownie's case, I would say he's lying to sell more books. That's the only thing I can think of. Well, Andrew Lownie lately has stated that basically it is his opinion that Andrew is Lord Porchester's son and not Philip's son. And Andrew Lownie basically bases his opinion on the fact that Andrew does not look like his siblings, which is not a very scientific way of determining paternity, I would say. So let's go look for ourselves and in a more scientific way. But before I do so, I want to issue a quick warning, or let me say another one. I know Angela Levin is a dear, dear soul. Yes, I actually own her biography on Camilla, a really well-written, enjoyable book. But it appears that Angela has a mental health issue, maybe early stage dementia or Alzheimer's, or she may be self-medicating because it is 100% clear that she is confused at times and struggles finding words. So whatever is ailing her, I feel very sorry for her, and this is in no way meant as being derogatory of her as a person, okay? Please, I want you to understand that. But she recently made a huge mistake when this particular subject was discussed, and she said on a podcast that the Queen and Prince Philip were apart for 6 months prior to Andrew's conception, that they got back together because they loved each other, and voila, Andrew was conceived. Now, it may sound great in a romantic Mills and Baboon story, but it is not true. Andrew was conceived in 1959, and Prince Philip was away for 4 months, October 1956 to February 1957, at least 2 years before Andrew was conceived. So because of this, because of the untruth or the less than scientific way of Mr. Lownie trying to determine Andrew's paternity, I've decided to take today to go do the correct legwork myself. Andrew was born February the 19th, 1960. So if we look at the window of conception, it would be roughly estimated to be May or June 1959. Now, during May and June, the Queen's schedule was packed with high-profile engagements where Lord Porchester was often present in his professional capacity as the Queen's racing manager. May was the height of the flat racing season, so the Queen and Porchy, as they called him, spent a significant amount of time together at Windsor Castle in preparation for the Royal Ascot. During the actual week of Royal Ascot, June 16th to 19th, Lord Porchester was in the Royal Box and at Windsor Castle, not only for work but also to attend Ascot Week parties. On June 18th, the Queen and Prince Philip departed for a 6-week tour of Canada. Now, there are 2 schools of thought out there. Some believe it is quite possible that Andrew was conceived in the week or 2 before the Canadian tour, and others believe that Andrew was conceived on board the Britannia when the Queen and Prince Philip were together 24/7, and that Andrew was more of a reconciliation baby. Now, what do I personally think? I think anything is possible, but what I won't do is state something as fact if I am not sure, particularly not something as harmful and hurtful as this. And regardless of what I think, at the very least I have some respect for Elizabeth II, and I do not have a vendetta of sorts against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor like Mr. Lownie appeared to have. Now look, I do not approve in any way of the things Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is accused of. But even so, I prefer to reserve judgment until the proof is in front of me. Nothing I have seen to date proves to me that Andrew had truly done some dastardly deeds. The girl on the floor, for instance, and Andrew next to her, according to Maxwell, they were practicing a first aid course and Andrew was demonstrating the actual CPR or whatever because he had done the same course before in the Navy. Now, do you, or Andrew Lownie for that matter, have any proof that that in particular is a lie? No, you don't, I don't, and neither does he. Anyway, I digress. It is certainly possible that Andrew could be the product of a tryst of sorts between the Queen and Portia, and it certainly is possible that Andrew was Philip's son. It is my opinion that Andrew was not conceived aboard the Britannia and not conceived in June at all, but rather in May. An electronic birth calculator gives possible conception dates as May the 15th to May the 29th, that being the 40 to 38 weeks prior to Andrew's birth. So all I can further point out to you is that the Shah of Iran was on a state visit in London from May the 5th to May the 13th. Mid to late May was indeed the time preceding the Epsom Derby and Royal Ascot. However, that also means absolutely nothing, as although Lord Porchester had more than usual contact with the Queen, Prince Philip was also in the United Kingdom, so both men were in the Queen's presence, and thus, unless Andrew submits to a blood test and it proves otherwise, Andrew Lownie has no right to make such assumptions or to sell it as a likely truth. All that's left for me to say is rest in peace, Elizabeth II. We thank you for your service, and even if you had a moment of kindness or love or whatever with another, it really is none of our business. Not anymore, as Andrew is now a private citizen who is being treated appallingly by his older brother. So rest, Queen, rest. You can't change anything anymore, so rest and let it be. Okay, my friends, that's all from me for today. Please take good care of yourselves and stay safe. Bye.